on the current rate structure. No rate structure increases are anticipated in 2023. All municipal directors are here to provide clarifications on their specific divisions, and I now pass this over to Femi Ogurunde, our Chief Financial Officer, to present the 2023 budget document.
Thank you, Director Donald.
And before you get started, of course, there's a proposed tax rate increase. This is a draft budget, so we're nowhere near the end. We are very much at the beginning, colleagues, so I just want to make it clear that, of course, this is the staff. This is staff's expression of certainly what they believe council's priorities are and what they need as a corporate entity to achieve on all of the goals. And I know Femi will elaborate on those as we go along. So go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here tonight to present to council and the community the 2023, or the draft 2023 staff recommended multi-year budget. My name is Femi Ogurunde, and I'm the treasurer for the municipality. Tonight, we'll be going through 3 key budgets that represent the municipality's strategic overall objective for 2023. The first would be the municipal operations. The second would be the municipal capital program. And the third will be the water and wastewater operations and capital program. So to start things off, this will be the agenda that we'll be reviewing tonight. We'll start off with a brief introduction. We'll talk about the budget classifications. We'll move on to the process, highlighting the strategic highlights as well. We'll talk about the 2023 goals and objectives and the way forward. We'll talk about what the budget and community impacts are. And then we'll go into a bit more detail on the draft 2023 operating budget, the draft 2023 capital budget, and then we'll talk about how tax rates are calculated, and then end things off and by moving into the water and wastewater budgets. Okay. So by way of introduction, I just want to talk a bit about what a municipal budget is and what it represents. A municipal budget is a financial plan that estimates costs and expenses for the municipality each year. It's also a strategic document that reflects council's priorities. The budget also helps serve as a tool for measuring performance, achieving objectives, and meeting financial commitments. Also, there is a legal framework around why we must have a municipal budget every year. The Municipal Act 2001, as amended, directs us to have one. Ontario Regulation 284-09 also speaks to how the budget is prepared, which has to be on cash basis, excluding amortization of capital assets. And Ontario Regulation 588-17 also speaks to asset management planning and in coordination with the development of a capital budget each year. And just as I mentioned earlier as well, the municipality, from a budget perspective, is divided into the municipal operations and the water and wastewater. So these are 2 separate budgets. And under the municipal operations, we have the operating budget and the capital budget. Under the water and wastewater division, we have the operating budget and the capital budget. And some of the categories you would find under an operating budget, things like wages and salaries, materials and supplies, maintenance and repairs of assets and infrastructure, community support and grants, different types of leases, vehicle leases and building leases, and payments for different programs and contract services, as well as the policing contract service that we have. And under the capital budget, you would see expenditures like improvements on buildings and facilities, upgrades of our roads and bridges, and maintaining or replacing, I should say, our equipment and fleet. Just to talk a bit more about the budget breakdown and how we develop the budget, we start off with all of the expenses in any given year, and then we go into the non-tax revenue. So when you subtract the non-tax revenue from the total expenses in any given year, you're left with a balance which must equate to the municipal taxes for the year. And that's how we derive a balanced budget. So some examples of non-tax revenues are user fees, investment income, grants from government and non-governmental organizations, and fees that developers are charged. And on the capital side, we see non-tax revenues such as development tax charges, draws from reserve, debt financing, and also gas tax and OCIF, which is the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. On the next slide, I want to talk a bit more about the budget process and how we've gotten to where we're at tonight. So from the previous year, 2022, Council had approved the base budget for 2023, which pretty much forms the starting point of the budget process. So staff take this over and do a detailed review based on service level, maintaining the current service levels, ensuring we have cost optimization, and also including Council's direction. Then the budget moves over to the senior management team, who does overall comprehensive review. We go ahead to have public consultation sessions, which we'll be having this year as well, before the budget then comes to Council for a final approval. Also, one of the things we've done as well is ensuring the service levels remain consistent at a minimum. We've also tried as much as possible to reduce discretionary spending, ensuring financial sustainability of all municipal programs as already previously approved. Also, we've ensured that the direction that this budget is progressing in is in line with the strategic plan for the municipality. Also, as part of the budget process, the budget has been developed based on two key concepts: modernization, ensuring that we invest or we continue to invest to maintain the momentum we've gained through efficiencies and rehabilitation of our key infrastructure, and also ensuring that our service delivery continues to meet the needs of our community and the partners through our various offerings. So on this slide, I'll just talk a bit about the highlights of the strategic plan that was approved in 2022. So we have 6 pillars in the strategic plan: the balanced growth, which ensures affordable housing and the recovery and maintaining of our heritage assets and building a strategy around that; great services, which consist of ensuring our transportation is improved and service level expansions and traffic safety as well; and also economic development, ensuring that we leverage the downtown core, our tourism strategy, and broadband services; and also environment and sustainability, which ensures that we preserve green spaces, we continue to be eco-conscious, maintaining our strong sense of community as well through community engagement and volunteerism; and efficient government, which also ensures that our service level remains. We have a succession and disaster planning, and that we're in line with our asset management and reserve policies, and we continue to modernize. So just to reiterate that the budget that we're presenting tonight as a staff recommended budget is built upon these pillars of the strategic plan as well. So at this point of the presentation, I will direct the slides to the department directors to go through the 2022 departmental highlights.
Just before you do that, I believe Councillor Barkley has a question. Go ahead, Councillor Barkley.
Yeah, I promise not to derail your presentation, but at certain points, I think it'd be good to take a break for questions. I just have one back related to the budget process. The division's review, you talked about cost optimization and taking into certain economic factors. I mean, how did you handle the current inflationary pressures that are happening and the impact on cost of living? I mean, how do you manage that when you're trying to predict a budget?
Through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Barkley. So basically what we've done as part of the budget process and part of our review as senior management is to ensure that all inflationary impacts from 2022 were well highlighted, and the trending to make sure that we're able to sustainably cover all of these increasing costs. Although we've started to see inflation trend out in 2023, it's kind of stabilized a bit. We don't expect that for the whole year of 2023 that inflation will come down, maybe towards the later part of the year, but right now it's anybody's guess in terms of how inflation will move in 2023. But we've ensured that we have highlighted all of those cost areas where we've seen inflationary impact and tried as much as possible to find efficiencies in other areas that are not as impacted with inflation, such as a good example is repurposing some of our capital investments from 2022. We brought forward a proposal to council that was approved, saying that we would delay certain projects just because the costs were escalating and find better ways to manage existing assets as opposed to replacing those assets. So we continue to look at these lines on a quarterly basis to ensure that we're not overrunning our costs, basically, through inflation.
Great, thanks. So you look to optimize certain services and repurpose certain capital costs, or deal just to, as a damper on inflationary things that were subject to inflation.
Correct.
And cost rises.
Yes.
But you must have tried to predict. You say the prediction is based on sort of a constant rate of inflation, that it's leveled off. So it fluctuates depending on what the materials are and the services are. But you must have had a number that you were
Correct.
You're
So,
aiming at. Yeah.
yes, through your worship, what we've tried to do, because as you've said, we've seen different inflationary costs on different types of materials and services, or goods and services. We've tried to use an average that way, because, for instance, gas and fuel have a different. We're probably seeing about the low 30% in those lines, and then things like our other materials and supplies, it's not as high as that. So we've tried to use an average across board, knowing fully well that in some cases it could be higher, some cases it would be lower.
Okay, anything else at this stage? Okay. So how would you like to order the presentation of directors as presented in the PowerPoint?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the first up is Public Works, and we have 5 points of highlights from 2022. The first is in regards to the completed and redesigned and upgrade of Wellington Road. This included an upgrade from a rural application to an urban between Bridge Street and the Forest Creek subdivision. There were 2 new PXOs installed at the rail trail, connections at Van Buren and at County Road 44. There were a couple new culvert installations, which were substantially more expensive than anticipated due to supply issues, but we installed a large new culvert at the Kloss Municipal Drain and 2 deteriorating crossroad culverts on Smith Road. New sidewalk extension on the north side of George Street between Rideau and Dumbrell. And then, of course, the International Plowing Match took up a little bit of Public Works time in 2022, which was a success, and we installed fences, upgrade and creation of roads, and hauling wood chips due to adverse weather conditions.
And might I ask, where is that Kloss municipal drain that you speak of?
The Kloss Municipal Drain, where the culvert was, is near the Donahue Road section of the municipality.
And how old would it have been?
Based on its condition, probably in excess of 40 years old.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll go to Mr. Guy. Go ahead, Mr. Guy.
Thank you, Your Worship. For Parks and Recreation, in 2022, we completed the new reception area here at the Municipal Center, providing a more accessible area for residents and visitors. We also completed the cenotaph rehabilitation and refurbishment, which is a project that was came about from our community member, Roy Brown. We received funding for the Riverside Park project and the multi-use pathway in the amount of $555,000, and we completed a new e-ceiling in Arena 2, eliminating the condensation issues that we had in that facility, and also resulting in a utility cost savings for the municipal center.
And for the
you.
purposes of the public, or those who may be watching, what is an e-ceiling?
New e-ceiling?
What is an e-ceiling?
So it is it's like a fiberglass sort of a wrap that is below the roof structure and the frame of the building, of the inside of the roof. And it just creates a second envelope to catch the condensation that might come from the interior of the roof.
Uh-huh. And do we have them in
It
both
creates
or just one?
it creates a better barrier that eliminates the condensation that we had. Because in the past, we were, especially during the summer months, months of July and August, when we had really high humidity, that's when we would see much condensation in Arena 2. Never an issue in Arena 1, but always in Arena 2. And we tried several different sort of ideas. We had various studies done on what to do with the facility and how to correct the problem, and that it seems to have finally corrected itself, so we're happy about that.
Good, thank you. All right, seeing no hands from council colleagues, we'll move on to corporate services.
Okay. In 2022, through corporate services, the new 10-year strategic plan was adopted. We also achieved platinum certification through the WCCD, the World Council on City Data. As well, a customer service and public engagement review was completed. We also had the adoption of a primary care strategy at looking at attracting physicians to our area. And we also worked with Public Works on the expansion of North Grenville's accessible transit service, expanding the service as well as reducing fares.
And I believe that this budget is particularly important when we speak about the primary care strategy because we're putting some money where our mouth is. Proposed money at this stage of the game, colleagues. All right. And Ms. Janeau, the expansion of the North Grenville Accessible Transit Service includes, of course, the study on rural transit that was brought to council, I guess, late last year. And at that point, we directed staff to advance its efforts to implement a North Grenville-wide on-demand transit system. Is correct?
Exactly, and that continuation of that project is included in this budget.
Good. Okay. We'll move on then. Planning. Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Your Worship. So in 2022, we saw the restructuring of bylaw services under the Planning and Development Department. This also resulted in the hiring of our manager of bylaw services, which has been, a very positive and successful piece for the municipality. And then in October of last year, council adopted a housing strategy for the municipality, so setting some higher policy goals and targets for consideration to look at housing not just on the affordable side, but across all sectors of housing. And I would be remiss if I didn't add, last year, council also adopted the design guidelines, which was a very positive project and has been well received by the development community.
And Amy, we know that planning is a very busy department. Can you speak, or off the top of your head, I apologize for asking you on the spot, number of housing starts or the number of, new commercial enterprises? Can you ballpark either of those?
Housing starts, certainly. The commercial, industrial, and institutional is a little more difficult because there's a variety of applications associated with it, with tenant fit-ups and renovations. But I believe on the housing side, we had 187 new residential starts. That's not just single-family dwellings, but that also takes into account, townhouse, semi-detached, and apartment units.
And 187 would be more or less the same as the previous year?
So it's slightly down from the previous year, but it's still above our projections in our population study from 2016 and an updated peer review we had done in 2020 that indicated the municipality would see on average a growth of 160 new dwelling units per year. So we're certainly trending above what was forecasted for the municipality.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Argamante, do you want to speak to finance?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So in 2022, the Finance Department completed the Phase 1 implementation of the Municipal Asset Management Maintenance module. So basically, this allows us to track our assets better in terms of all of the repair and maintenance costs associated with these assets. And it also helps us to be able to better identify when assets need to be replaced, as opposed to spending more maintaining assets that should be replaced.
Good, thank you. Emergency and Protective Services, Chief Holcomb?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. A couple of the highlights for the Emergency Protective Services included a new emergency management program for staff with a corporate restructuring and staff changes that incurred in 2022 provided opportunity for us to enhance our emergency management program. It provided some enhanced training events, program orientation for staff, and as well group exercise. All staff were able to advance together as a team in our new emergency management program. Another item that we're highlighting is the replacement of our heavy extrication rescue tools for responding to auto extrication incidents. Our existing tools are over 20 years old and we're beginning to show their age, and we were able to replace those tools with the new equipment that's newer technology. We call it e-technology because the equipment now operates with the battery power rather than gas-powered engines. So we're creating a more environmentally friendly workplace, less storage space on trucks as well as less weight. So it's improving overall operations.
Good. I was fascinated by the term e-technology, so you've helped me unpack that, so thank you. Office of the CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. In 2022, the Office of the CAO undertook the development and redesign of the municipality's new website. This undertaking also ensured that we were meeting AODA legislative requirements and also made the website more accessible and user-friendly.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Mr. Ogunrande.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for 2023, and as this budget represents that we're presenting tonight, we'll be looking at some goals and objectives that are highlighted just for council and the community to see how the strategic objectives for 2023 will affect the community, basically, going into 2023. Under continuing our service improvements, we'll be reviewing and updating municipal bylaws related to bylaw enforcement. We'll be initiating an official plan review process. We'll also be undertaking the completion of the play structures at Oxford Station and Crozier Park. We also look to create a community engagement strategy, which is in line with the recommendations from the Customer Service and Public Engagement Review. We'll also be looking at beginning a conceptual design of the Temple Park as well. And under our modernization objectives, we'll be looking at further digitization of the building permit process. We're looking to commence the design work also for the expansion of County Road 43 multi-use path to River Road. We'll be looking at the upgrade of arena operations in the line of refrigeration and security systems. We'll be looking to complete the records management implementation project, which is part of the modernization funding from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. We'll also be looking to complete the rehabilitation of the Riverside Park in 2023, and also we'll be looking to begin the County Road 43 upgrade project as well. And from a planning and accountability standpoint, we'll be looking to complete the fire service community risk assessment. We'll be looking to do quarterly performance reporting, including trend analysis and looking out for those outliers in our costing, and also improve transparency when it comes to providing updates on ongoing and planned capital projects.
Go ahead.
Just a previous slide. I'm curious about the quarterly performance reporting. Is that sort of like a financial where we stand every quarter?
That's correct.
Yeah. So it would report on trending, things that are trending over and things that are coming under budget?
That's correct.
Great, thanks.
Okay. So on this slide, I want to talk a bit about some of the impacts that we've seen in the preparation of the 2023 budget. Some challenges, some opportunities as well. On the level of service basis, we've seen impacts from ensuring existing levels of service remain the same, and we've also seen some impact of growth as well in our community and the need for further investments to maintain those service levels. We've seen pressure on municipal resources, both from a human and infrastructure perspective, as well as a financial perspective as well. The long-term financial plan as well has played a role in terms of preparing the budget, ensuring that we're in line with our asset management plan, as well as needs assessment. We've also made sure to ensure fiscal sustainability for the future. We've also seen impacts from inflation and supply chain issues, operating costs on the side of utilities, fuel, materials, and supplies. We've seen some increased capital costing as well from 2022, which we expect to see as well in 2023. For this budget process as well, we'll be going ahead with public engagement with 3 public consultation sessions. We've also ensured that Council's strategic direction has also been embedded in the budget. We continue to see impacts from COVID-19 as revenues from our facilities and rentals are not yet back to pre-COVID levels. And on the modernization front, we are considering further investment in our infrastructure to ensure that we remain modern. We also have some climate change considerations as part of our budget for 2023 as well. So on this slide, I would like to highlight some of the community investments for 2023 that are embedded in the budget. The first category is a community grant, of which we received 25 applications. As part of this budget tonight, we're bringing forward a recommendation of a funding of $98,150. On the community support side, we've signed long-term arrangements and agreements with the victim services for a funding that's going to cover the years 2022 to 2026 to the tune of $32,500, and the Salvation Army Food Bank for $25,000, Beth Donovan Hospices for $15,759, Seniors Escorted Transit Services for $12,500, the Kempville Youth Center for $30,000. As well as funding for the Dundas Manor to the tune of $20,000, and Kentville District Hospital in 2023 will actually be funded with $120,000. Apologies for the error on the slide. It's actually $120,000 and not $100,000. And on the community development side of things, we will be investing $75,000 into the Affordable Housing Reserve, as well as $75,000 into the Heritage Reserve. And on the community improvement plan, we intend to invest $112,500, as well as the business support to the tune of $100,000. This brings us to a total investment of $716,409.
Yes, and we expect to hear from 2 of our guests this evening, but I'll go to Councillor Strachan first and take any other questions from Council. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Arguinde. I guess a couple of questions about this one. I noticed the Kempville Youth Center is a new addition this year. Is the intent for that one to be ongoing annual funding of the $30,000?
Through your worship, yes, that's the intent.
Okay, thank you. One other point, just wanted to see where I am here. 2 other points, I guess. The community improvement plan. My understanding is that it was well under the $112,500 that was allocated last year. And so this, I guess for clarity's sake, this is the sort of maximum amount that could be spent, and any money that is not spent in the previous year is rolled in to cover the $112,500 for the upcoming year. Is that correct?
Through your worship. So actually, when the community investment plan was approved by council, the funding was actually dedicated to come out of the general reserves. So a good example is the 2022 financial year, where we spent way below the $112,000 we had put in the budget. So that fund never came out of the reserve since it wasn't spent. Mm-hmm. So this $112,000 that we're presenting in 2023 is like a top-up back to the existing amount that council had approved. But if we do get requests to spend above the 112,000, we will not be able to because that's the ceiling that council has placed.
Okay, correct. All right, thank you very much for clarifying that. One other point, and I think it's more so, I don't know if the rest of the council will agree with this, but under small business support, could we actually clarify what that means? Because that is where the BIA and North Grenville Chamber of Commerce funding comes, correct? If we could perhaps change it to read that as opposed to small business support, if the mayor and Deputy Mayor Barclay agree, I think it would help for clarity's sake. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I think that's more transparent if we name those two organizations. Two questions I have. Second one you may not be able to answer right away, but I'm curious. First one is under community grants. We had $291,000 in requests, and what's in the budget is $98,150. It's a very specific number. Where does that number come from?
Through your worship, the $98,150 was the exact amount that we funded in the 2022 budget. So we've placed that same amount as a placeholder in this draft budget, pending council's deliberations on all of the requests that we've received and direction to in terms of the eventual funding.
Okay, thank you. Second question. Last year, in the budget presentation, we were provided a list of non-jurisdictional expenses, and I'm just wondering, from these community investments, can you identify which expenses are not within our jurisdiction? I'm looking at Dundas Manor, for example.
Through your worship, that might be a bit difficult to do on the spot, but I can certainly get you that information.
I'd be interested in that. Thank you.
For sure.
Yes, indeed. Well, I would say that in the case of Dundas Manor, this is the second year, Mr. Ogarande, that this appears, right?
That's correct, Your Worship.
The amount asked of the municipality of North Grenville to be committed to a long-term capital rehabilitation of Dundas Manor was proportional to the number of NG residents that they typically get. So I think one could have a longer discussion about what is non-jurisdictional and what is jurisdictional. By virtue of Dundas Manor being outside of our borders, I would argue doesn't mean that there aren't North Grenville residents that are, in fact, using that facility ultimately. Of course, it means they change their address, but there was a very careful calculation done by Dundas Manor of the proportion of residents who may find themselves in that particular facility. So.
Understood. I have no problem. I'd just like to know, as we did last year, what the total amount would be.
Indeed, I guess I am reflecting on how we break down jurisdictional versus non-jurisdictional. I can tell you at every level of government, and we have the same conversation at the counties, where I will remind you, every taxpayer in this municipality is paying for an $86 million upgrade of a long-term care facility in Athens. That, long-term care and other aspects of taking care of children and the elderly in this region will inevitably involve people going outside of our border. So I think it's how we define jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional. Certainly, I think historically municipalities weren't necessarily in the business of funding hospitals, right, or funding Beth Donovan hospice care. There's a variety of things that I think municipalities have come to accept, need some support from the community. So I think it's just a question of what is it, how do we define jurisdictional in that respect. So with that said, the only other thing I wanted to add, and then I think Mr. Ogarande, we can invite our guests up, is certainly the Kemble Youth Center annual support is proposed, right? It's certainly something that you've reflected back to us. Given the other vulnerable constituencies that have been served under the community support line for some time, it came to our attention that the youth center is also in urgent need of some support, so that's why it's there. But just because it's proposed as annual doesn't mean that it couldn't have a defined period of time, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, whatever it is. So
that's correct.
I'm assuming that's at our discretion, yes. Of course. Okay. Councillor Strachan.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, just to add one more point, and more so for everyone else, maybe whoever's watching, the community grants is obviously still just proposed. I mean, we've just wrapped up the presentations yesterday, and we had 25 very passionate applicants and a lot of requests in there. So this is just a number that's a placeholder for right now. So just to clarify, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, Councillor Strachan, for that addition, because there's much more discernment and deliberation to do on that one, and I appreciate that staff were just trying to placehold a number that seemed to make sense to you, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, so with that in mind, maybe we can invite Ms. Rogers up to do a short presentation. I think it might be in the next slide, or it's a little bit down the road in terms of the additional considerations. There you go, Darcy. All right, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And if you could just tip your mic down so that it's a little bit closer. There you go. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Dawn Roger, and I am the Executive Director of Seniors Community Services, and I am very happy to be here this evening to summarize to Council our incremental ask as part of your budget. So for us, we really think that this is a start of a broader conversation in terms about current transportation capacity and a level of demand and what solutions we can offer the community of North Grenville and help this community work towards sustainable transportation services. So our transportation service delivers transportation through volunteers that are trained, police records checked, that have been within the community for the last 20, 30, 40 years, providing volunteer support to seniors community services, looking to provide trips in the last year. Last year, it was 1,950 trips that we provided to a number of clients that were about 90% of our clients are 65 years of age and over. So our on-demand transportation service is a door-to-door service that looking after seniors that need to get to medical appointments outside of North Grenville for life-sustaining treatments, chemo, dialysis 3 times a week, which requires a volunteer to wait 4 hours for the individual at a very economical cost. So what we're asking for as council's support is the enhancement and sustainability of an incremental ask of $17,500 that would be directed towards enhancing the capacity and sustaining our transportation program. Much like every other community agency, we are suffering the brunt of inflation, and we're seeing incremental increases, 12% in supplies, and our funding does not keep pace with that. What we're looking to do is optimize the use of existing scheduling software, doing volunteer training, extensive marketing collateral to connect more clients in the North Grenville area with our services so that they are not feeling as though the only option may be a private charter to an appointment, just not knowing what is available for them in this community. So just a couple of stats I'd like to share with you. In 2021, we did 1,838 trips and we served 187 clients. In 2022, we had an increase to 1,930 trips and we served 194 clients. So 95% of our clients, as I had mentioned, are over the age of 65. They are aging beyond what they had expected. Their families are no longer living local in the area. They're trying to maintain their independence and living within their community independently and with dignity, and we're looking forward to supporting them as they age in place. And then in 2021, we did 287 dialysis drives. So that's that life-sustaining drives that had we not been available, it's hard to know how people would organize transportation if they didn't have our service available. So I guess it's kind of at what cost do we provide the service? And it's very economical and feasible, and I think it's evidenced by our client numbers each year. So I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
And as I understand it, you reimburse for mileage. So you administer this program
That's right.
with that in mind.
That's correct, Your
So
Worship.
people are not paid for their time, but they're paid for their mileage.
That's right. They're paid for out-of-pocket fuel costs and a little bit of wear and tear, but by no means does 50 cents a kilometer cover their expenses.
Okay. And obviously, given the number of trips and the number of clients, you have a lot of repeat clients who are depending on a particular driver, right, to
That's
take them
right.
back and forth. And I'm assuming relationships are built over time as a particular volunteer might get to know a particular client and get into a routine of servicing that person. Is that what you observe?
That's right. It's a very personalized service. The way it works is the client contacts our office. Oftentimes, they've established a relationship with the volunteer. They request their certain favorite driver if they can, and they feel a sense of comfort. And as COVID has shown all of us that there's a lot of residual mental health issues that have erupted as a result of the worldwide pandemic. So there's that sense of comfort in knowing that the individual and their driving style, and they're feeling safe and cared for. So that's the narrative that isn't always articulated at times.
And am I to understand that by virtue of the kind of appointments, it's largely medical, is that correct?
That's right.
And it's largely outside of our borders, because we don't offer those things for the most part?
That's correct. So many times most times it's Ottawa, Kingston. More times than not, most times it's Ottawa, West, East, Central Ottawa. Dialysis appointments to Winchester Hospital are quite common, as well as appointments to Kingston General. So all over, really. Brockville, we have clients that want to access our services from out of area. So we travel from Kempville to Prescott to take them to an appointment to Kingston. So we have a reputation
I see.
of good service.
And we're just a minor player, as I understand it, because you also receive quite a bit of United Way funding as part of this program?
Actually, our United Way funding is dedicated to the Meals on Wheels. So we do receive some funding from Ontario Health East for transportation, but certainly doesn't cover near the cost of what the program is involved. And currently, our staffing complement is 3.4 full-time equivalents, and we normally operate at 4. So we're looking forward to introducing another staff member who can help organize and spearhead the transportation program.
And are you turning people away right now?
Yeah, at times we are dependent on the availability of our volunteer drivers and the needs of the client. We do have varying needs for clients that are wheelchair bound. There's certain guidelines that we follow. Bariatric patients, we're not prepared to be able to provide transportation. So there are individuals that we just can't serve for sure.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Not a question, through you, Madam Mayor, not a question, more a comment. As we roll out this North Grenville-wide on-demand service, your service is quite distinct. I see it as a compliment.
Thank you.
In that you're providing personalized service. I know that's important to my mother in Ottawa. She always requests Richard to pick her up. But, so I understand that value add. But I think there may be an opportunity as we get involved in this on-demand service municipal-wide to maybe join forces or help out with some of the scheduling software. And I would hope that if you do adopt scheduling software, that it's complementary or compatible with whatever we come up with in terms of scheduling, because there could be some savings involved.
No, we would definitely be open to collaborating on many levels. What is in the best interest of the serving the community and reducing the workload on our existing staff. So we would welcome that.
Do you have any local trips, or is it
Yes.
specifically medical and out of boundary?
No, we do a number of local trips. Local trips are Kempville proper and include 2 stops for $10. So it's pharmacy, lab. There's a social to go visit family in a local long-term care facility, or even just to get groceries. Post office, things like that.
And what proportion what proportion of your clientele would be served by those trips versus sort of the trips further afield, you know, to medical facilities outside of North Grenville?
So the majority of our drives I'd have to get you, I could get you some data to be, Your Worship, to be accurate. Majority of our drives are outside of North Grenville. North Grenville residents traveling outside to Ottawa area or such.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, colleagues? Okay. Thank you very much for being with us this evening, and we appreciate that your service is very well subscribed. And I understand the enhancement would potentially help with the coordination, given the number of trips you're doing a week. Is that where you would see the value add with additional financial support from the municipality?
Right, it's the organizing, coordination with the volunteers, the scheduling, our outreach, all of those pieces together would bolster what we're able to provide currently.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And so next up, I think we'll welcome Mr. Johnson for a quick presentation on the BIA Ask, Old Town Kemptville BIA. Welcome.
Wow, tough act to follow. Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for the opportunity to have a quick chat tonight. I will apologize because I wasn't prepared to make a presentation, but I can definitely run over some of the things that are part of our request and, of course, answer any questions that you have. The BIA, the Old Town Kemptville BIA, has been very fortunate over the last couple of years to have council's financial support on a number of items. Primarily, a lot of our events, our promenade events, have been financially supported by council through the budget. And the original Busker Fest from last year, even though we we presented back in 2019. We had a little trouble with this whole pandemic thing, getting Busker Fest off the ground, but finally in 2022 it happened, and obviously it was quite successful. So throughout the last couple of years, the process of acquiring some of the funding that we've been able to use, including for the salary for the executive director, it's been kind of how can I say, a little bit of a process. It hasn't been sort of one specific ask like we're doing today. Instead, it's been, oh, some money's available, great, you know, let's apply to that. And so it's, I must say, from my perspective, it's nice to actually be able to, as we were requested, to sort of do a more comprehensive one-time ask instead of me constantly calling Matt Gilmer to say, Matt, is there any funding available? So we're very happy about the process. Unfortunately, it's the first time for us going through this, and with the changeover from one board to the next, and it's been a bit of a challenge to sort of put all this in place and get all our newbies up to speed. And but it's been a valuable process, because I think there's nothing like, as you know, in your first year, in your last term, there's nothing like hitting the ground running, right? So for the first item that was part of our ask, I'm gonna have to say this is not something I'm really comfortable touching on because of conflict of interest. It's funding the executive director's salary, so forgive me, but I'm not comfortable commenting on that. However, the next item that we had requested was a facilitated strategic planning session in the amount of $15,000. So originally, when we had submitted our first budget request to the CAO, we had actually had a figure of $10,000 for this item, and then we got a couple of snickers about how much we would get for $10,000 in terms of a strategic planning document. So we bumped that up a little bit more. Primarily the reason for this, aside from the obvious, is we just felt that it was critical for the BIA to have a document or a plan that would guide us through the next 5 years. The last 2-3 years have been very difficult for many of our members in the BIA, so we have tried to be responsive to their needs and sort of steer ourselves away maybe from more of our strategic goals and focus more on member support. So I feel like we've definitely supported our members over the last 2-3 years. So now, even though we all know that the pandemic is still affecting many of our small businesses in the community, we did feel that it's time to pivot back and refocus more on strategic goals and long-term planning for the BIA. This item was unanimously supported by the board, and we've had some municipal staff comment as well that they felt that this was an important item for the BIA. I'll just read my comment here. There was discussion about the original figure being too low. So obviously $10,000 just is not going to be enough to have a decent strategic plan. So we added 5,000 to make it 15,000, but if we found that we needed more money potentially for a good strategic plan, we were prepared to dip into our modest reserve to come up with the rest because we felt it was critical that this get done. Next item, the Kemptville Busker Fest. So the request for funding is $25,000 for that item. So as we've discussed at the marketing and programming level, at the Busker Fest organizing committee level, and at the board level, we talked about how many of the costs associated with Busker Fest have gone up considerably since the original funding request we made back in 2019. So we got our request in 2019, we got our money in 2020, and then like I told you, we had to sit on it for 2 years until it was safe to actually do an event. So inflation aside, just over those 3 years, costs have gone up on pretty much everything. So when you add inflation in there as well, we felt very confident that $25,000 was a reasonable ask for Busker Fest. According to, give me a second here. According to the, I'll say this right, the Tourism Regional Economic Impact Model, the initial report we did for Busker Fest, according to this tool that's available through the provincial government, it talks about the economic impact of tourism. And we plugged in our event into a calculator, and it advised us that we specified no overnight stays because it was just a one-day event, that our event was going to generate about $460,000 worth of economic activity in North Grenville. That was back in 2019. So I think it's pretty safe to say that investment today that number would be considerably higher, and especially seeing as how we're going to be targeting a higher attendance level for the event for this year as well. Another factor involved in our ask is a number of the expenses that we had for the event itself, they were actually inadequate. The number of people who actually attended the event exceeded our projections. So we estimated we had about 6,000 people attend. We were looking between 3,000 and 5,000. 5,000 obviously on the high end. So our porta potties and hand washing station, they all ran out of supplies by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was 3 hours before we had originally intended the event to be over. Mind you, the weather finished us off at 3:30 that day, but still, we had run out. This means that more and more of these items will be required for next year. So obviously, we're going to need more hand washing stations and more porta potties. We also have, we had a sponsor from last year who provided a number of chairs and tables for us. They will be unable to be a sponsor for us this year. So instead of having free tables and chairs that we were able to use, we will now have to incur an expense to provide those. And of course, according to our feedback we received from both vendors and visitors, they touched on the fact that we did not have enough places. They felt we did not have enough places for people to sit and rest during the day. And that's definitely fair, but that day, if I remember correctly, on May 21st was actually 30 degrees Celsius. So considerably more uncomfortable than we were anticipating. And despite there being provincial funding available for events like Buskerfest, most of the funding that we've looked at, we are not accessible for as a BIA. A lot of that funding is for nonprofits and community organizations who are typically, organizing the events. We've even had some discussions with RTO9 about accessing some of their funding, and they were willing to work with us, but we were a little uncomfortable with some of the things that they were requesting of us. So we just thought it would just be better to, go our own this way, go on our own this time, and then next year we could look at RTO9 again. I don't want to be accused of money laundering, so we have to be careful about what we do. Next item was BIA marketing and programming for downtown for the amount of $25,000. So in the original submission to the CAO, we had put this number at $35,000. This is to cover marketing and programming for downtown events throughout the year. So one of the results of the focus on supporting our members and through events like Promenade events, so a lot of our events now are much more substantial than they were before, because now we're spending more money than we previously did, because a lot of our events were self-financed up until a couple of years ago. But now with the additional funding, we've sort of raised the bar on ourselves a bit. And now we have, a lot of our events have become, like I said, quite substantial. So when we looked through our event schedule, we decided we could make some cuts to the amount we were requesting. And without impacting the quality of the event that we feel we could have. That was important to us. Just because you have less money doesn't mean you can have less of an event. So we felt that even though we had less money, that we could still do what we needed to do what the community expects us to do in terms of hosting community building events, what our members expect of us in terms of our ability to draw visitors to the downtown. So we felt that we felt good about our number. Though the Great Canadian Barn Dance this year was very successful, and that's probably outside of Buskerfest our most requested event, or the most feedback we've gotten about one of our events. Obviously, we felt that the funding for that event was significant. It was $23,000. And even though we returned, I believe, just over $5,000, it's still a lot. And we felt that rather than trying to do something like that again, that maybe we could incorporate that style of an event into maybe something like the Busker Fest, because clearly that was a hit for us.
Mr. Johnson, I'll just ask that you wrap up fairly soon. I think you're close to
This
the
is
end.
fascinating, though.
Very, very.
All right.
We just have a long night ahead, so
All right.
thank you.
Fair enough. And the last item on the on the initial request to this through the CAO was money for admin support for the beleaguered, overwhelmed executive director. But after discussion with the board, we had been sort of running shorthanded as an executive. We were down a volunteer, and after discussion, we felt that with a new secretary in place and maybe a little more workload redistribution, that we could probably do without the admin support for now, depending on how long our ED keeps it together.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions, council colleagues? All right, why don't we take just a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'm going to advise that we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll refresh and come back at 8, and hopefully we'll ensure that Mr. Ogarande gets through the rest of his presentation. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Johnson. Thank you for the detailed explanation of the municipal ask, and I agree, having a single ask is probably a lot easier than, coming to the municipality and to council many times during the year. You mentioned a modest reserve. Can you ballpark what that modest reserve is?
No.
Okay.
I know it was over 10,000, but
So it's north of 10,000.
yeah.
Second question, your programming, I know you've called a general members meeting to discuss your operating budget for 2023. And in that operating budget, you've got a line for programming. I believe it's $9,000.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to the $9,000, you're hoping to raise another $25,000 through this ask. So a total of $32,000 this year for programming versus last year you had Busker Fest and barn dance money as well as your operating budget.
And there was money the last 2 years through economic development. There was a fund there for, I think it was literally called downtown events.
Right.
And we were graciously allowed access to that funding.
Yeah.
I believe it was around $15,000.
Yeah, I believe Mr. Gilmer has $7,500 for a promenade-style event downtown. So 25 plus 9 in your programming budget is 32 plus another 7,500 out of the EcoDev budget. We're getting close to $40,000 for programming this year. That's the way I figure. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Councilor Strachan?
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. I appreciate seeing this all at once ahead of the time, and I think we're all happy to see that rather than piecemealing it throughout the year, so thank you for that. A question that I think came up a lot during the community grants presentations is the question of sponsorship. There's grants, and you've answered that question, but on the sponsorship side, that with an event that was a huge success, I would hope that there would be some bigger names, perhaps with deeper pockets in the community on the business side of things, who would want to sponsor these events and be, the signature sponsor, the event brought to you by. And have you had those conversations yet with any of the local businesses?
We've just started those conversations. Originally, we were looking for the title sponsor from our first year to be part of a 3-year agreement, and they basically said, we want to wait and see. They wanted us to attract a certain number of people to our event. and we've satisfied that. But we seem to be having a little trouble connecting with them this time. So we've just started to reach out and collect new sponsors and offer the value of being involved with us. So I expect us to raise a similar amount of money that we did for the last one. We just had 2 years to do it last time. This time we're going to have 3 months. So we've already got our product out there, and people obviously see the value. So I think we'll be successful.
2 years versus 3 months with some experience and some proof. I think it
Yes.
probably works in your favor. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, we appreciate the work of the BI and have seen the results, so it's great to get the presentation this evening. Just out of respect for colleagues, we're going to just take 5 minutes and stretch our legs. Council's been at it since 5:30 after already a very long day, so we'll just come back very shortly and resume the meeting, and we'll turn it right over to you, Mr. Ogurende. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We're going to resume with our budget presentation, and we'll invite Mr. Ogrande back to the platform to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So on this slide, we believe it's necessary to go through some of the expense categories that Council and the public will be seeing on the departmental budgets. Just to provide some context as to what actually lives in those expense lines. So the first is salary and benefits. This is basically made up of the gross wages of full-time and part-time employees. It includes all our seasonal workers as well as the honorarium paid to volunteer firefighters. Benefits included such as the municipal pension plan, the extended health benefits, Canada Pension Plan, employment insurance, WSIB, and employers' health taxes. On the materials and supplies, we have the winter control materials, primarily sand and salt, dust control materials, as well as fuel for our fleet. This line also includes our postages, small office equipment and furniture, safety apparels, and computer equipment. The next line is insurance, which is primarily the general liability insurance program for the municipality. It also includes our cybersecurity insurance premium, as well as insurance on all our assets, fleet, heavy and small, owned and leased, all our buildings and equipment. The contracted property services is made up of our utilities, our hydro, telephone, cell phone, internet, natural gas. All our repairs and maintenance of our assets is also in this line, as well as the charge for our vehicle lease program under enterprise. The next slide is the contracted professional services, which is made up of the external professional services rendered to the municipality. Examples of this are IT support, legal, auditing, advertisements and publications, reports and studies, membership fees and dues, training, conferences, and so on. The next line is other costs, which is made up of external funding to various bodies and government and groups, through grants and contributions. Examples of this are community investments and support, contribution to the public library, and so on. The next line is the fiscal expenses, which is the interest on all the municipalities' long-term debts, fees and charges on our bank accounts and our corporate cards, internal departmental transfers as well. It also includes the mandatory payments to the conservation authorities. The next line is debt servicing and transfers, which is primarily made up of a transfer to the capital program, which is separate from the operating, transfer to reserves, as well as principal payments on all municipal long-term debt. So going into the numbers, for 2023, we are presenting an overall operating program to the tune of 26.8 million. Last year's budget for 2022 was 25.8 million. So year over year, we're seeing roughly around the $1 million growth, which represents a 3.9% baseline increase from 2022. On the expenses side, salaries and benefits to the tune of 10.4 million, materials and supplies 1.3 million, insurance to 644,000, contracted property services 2.7 million, contracted professional services 7.1 million, other costs 1.6 million, fiscal expenses 557,000, debt servicing and transfers 2.4 million. And on the revenue side, we have transfers from reserve to the tune of 949,000, taxation at 17.9 million, user fees at 4.2 million, grants and governmental transfers at 2.6 million, transfer from development charges at 255,000, and other revenue at 796,000. So this slide shows a breakdown of all our expense categories in terms of the contribution to the overall. So salaries and benefits is the highest contributor at 38.9%, materials and supplies at 4.8%, insurance at 2.4%, contracted property services at 10.1%, 6.4%, contracted professional services at 26.4%, other costs at 6.1%, fiscal expenses at 2.1%, and debt servicing and transfers at 9.2%. And on the revenue side, our major revenue driver is taxation at 66.7%, followed by user fees at 15.7%, our grant and governmental transfers at 9.9%, transfer from DCs, development charges at 0.9%, other revenue at 3%, and transfer from reserves at 3.7%. So on this slide, I'm just going to talk a bit more about how we developed the budget in terms of the numbers. So as I had previously alluded to in one of the earlier slides, we come up with the municipal expense for the year, which for this year is 26.8 million. And then we consider what the municipal taxes for the previous year was, which is 16.5 million. We consider what the additional taxes we've received from assessment growth in the municipality, both for 2021 and what we're projecting for 2022, which is 771,000. Our other revenue sources, which includes the user fees, the government transfers, investment income, and other developer fees to the tune of 7.9 million. And the reserve transfer of 949,000. So this brings us to a total revenue of 26.2 million. So in order to be able to balance the 2023 budget, we require an additional tax of $641,345, which is equivalent to a 3.87% tax increase for 2023. And on this slide, just to show how the distribution of the average cost per household of each municipal service that is on offering, I'll start off with corporate services at $207 per household, and these are all annual figures. Finance at $47, emergency and protective services at $163, the office of the CEO at $331, public works and services at $461, environmental services at $265, the North Grenville Community Center facility at $257, library services at $71, policing contract at $342, council at $37, parks and recreation $216, planning and developmental services, which includes bylaw, at $116.
Mr. Ogunrande, I'm just going to stop you there because Deputy Mayor has a question. Average cost per household per municipal service, and this is based on a household of what approximate value?
We've used an average household at an assessment value of $400,000, approximately $400,000.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Barclay. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Ogunrande. Could you go back one slide to the calculation of taxation? So my question regards the transfer from reserves. I understand that we have to have a balanced budget. So I understand how it's calculated, the additional tax requirement. But I note in last year, the reserve transfer was 1.347, 1,347,000. And this year, you're looking at 949,000. So there's a decrease in the transfer. Could that be, and what I'm suggesting is it possible to increase the reserve from transfer, thereby lowering the tax levy? Is that possible in order to have a balanced budget? Therefore, additional tax required would be less, and that 3.87 would come down?
Through your worship, it is possible. Short answer, yes. Longer answer is, as we try to ensure fiscal sustainability of the budget and municipal operations, it's not always recommended, to have a transfer from reserve to reduce a tax increase, except in the case where we have a dedicated reserve that has been earmarked to tax stabilization. But unfortunately, we don't have one at this time. So I guess it is at council's discretion in terms of whether we can eventually do the transfer, but it wouldn't be a long-term sustainable solution.
So there are dedicated reserves that we're obligated to contribute, and we don't have a tax stabilization reserve currently, so,
No, we don't have one.
okay. Thing to explore.
Correct.
And to that end, in your opinion, do you think a tax rate stabilization reserve is wise? Certainly, I know sitting at the county table, particularly as warden, we've had this conversation many times, and in fact, we've employed that this time we expect to utilize the tax rate stabilization reserve to ensure slightly lower tax rate increase than would have been otherwise the case. So, it seems to be a mechanism that perhaps we're at a point in our evolution as a community we should be exploring. Would you agree?
That's correct, Your Worship. In 2023, we'll be bringing forward a recommendation to council to establish that reserve, which can be used for future budgets, for sure.
Great. And how would we generate that? So we would have to set aside a small percentage of next year's revenue. What would be your recommendation?
Yes, we could, there are a couple of ways we could go about it. We could either wait at the end of the year and see what our annual surplus comes down to.
Yes.
That way we know for sure what we're transferring. Or at the beginning of the year, during the budget process, we can also estimate how much we think would be a reasonable amount to transfer, and then revisit that number at the end of the year.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, thank you. We look forward to getting a further report on that. Okay, so can we, we'll carry on, colleagues? Okay, go ahead.
We've gone through the additional budget request.
Yes.
The only thing I'll add to this slide is these requests have not been included in the draft budget tonight. And we estimate that the total requests that have been brought forward to the tune of $82,000 will be equivalent to a 0.5% additional tax increase.
And that's assuming that there aren't further efficiencies found within existing budget lines,
That's correct.
If we just laid this on top with no changes.
That's correct.
So just to be clear about that, there are perhaps other ways, right, to support these requests.
That's correct.
But with no changes, we would be looking at that 0.5.
That's correct.
Okay, if we were to move forward. All right, thank you.
Okay. So on this next slide, I want to talk a bit more about our municipal debt and the position where we are for 2023. This is a list of all of the debts that we have right now. The two that I've highlighted on this slide, number 5 and number 6, will be maturing in 2023. That's for information purposes to council and community. On the next slide, the list continues, and the list, the number 14 on the list, it will also be expiring in 2023 as well. Total principal payment that we expect for 2023 is to the tune of $693,000. Total interest payments for 2023, $609,000. Combined principal and interest payments to the tune of $1.3 million for 2023. And at the end of 2023, our total balance in terms of debt will be $10.7 million.
If I might, just for the purposes of an explanation about debt and sort of municipalities overall, certainly we've been led to understand by yourself that we actually have a very low debt payment ratio relative to the revenues we collect on an annual basis. So can you just reinforce or explain that in better words than I have?
That's correct, Your Worship. So per the Ministry of Municipal Housing and Affairs, it precipitates that you cannot borrow, the servicing of your debt as a municipality cannot be more than 25% of your own sourced revenue.
Indeed.
So basically all of the revenue that the municipality brings in, the cost to service those debts cannot exceed 25%. Right now, we're about 6.5%, so there's definitely room in terms from a borrowing perspective.
And our risk is extremely low,
Yes.
given that we're at 6% of a 25% ceiling
That's
mandated by
correct.
the ministry. Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, onwards.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Okay, on the next slide, just to talk a bit more about municipal taxation and how we arrive at property taxes. So property taxes is a combination of the property's assessed value, which is derived through MPAC based on evaluation of a property, both commercial and residential. For 2023, we've been notified that there will be no increase to properties' assessed values in the community. These values are then multiplied by the three categorization of taxes. The first is the municipal rate, the education rate, and the county rate. So as part of this budget for 2023, staff are proposing a 3.87% tax rate increase. The Ministry of Finance has notified the municipality that there will be no increases on the education tax rates for 2023. At this time, we're estimating that the counties might increase their rates to the tune of 10%.
To be clear, I think we're now just under 9%, but the budget has yet to be passed. And in fact, there's a very large paramedic service liability for workers' compensation owing to presumptive injury legislation. That's one of the key drivers of the tax rate increase for the United Counties, among a couple of other things. But certainly we'll be able to confirm that number in 2 or 3 weeks.
For sure. So on this slide, I'm going to talk a bit about how we, some estimates we've made concerning property taxes. So the tax distribution for 2023, similar to last year, is 14% for education taxes, 33% for county taxes, and 53% for municipal taxes. And based on an average assessment value for a residential property to the tune of $400,000, we don't expect this value to increase in 2023. So that remains constant. And you would see the value of the property tax based on the approved rate for 2022 and what the value is based on the estimated rates, both for the county and what we're proposing for 2023 for the municipality. So based on that calculation, the average residential impact would be a movement from $4,500 in 2022 to about $4,700 in 2023. And this would result in an average property tax rate increase of 5.39%. This is consolidated across the three different categories of taxes. And so an average household can expect to see an increase of about $245 on their property taxes based on an assessment value of about $400,000.
And that number will fluctuate as we get a final number from the counties, right?
That is
correct. As well as potentially our own, depending on where we land.
That is correct.
Okay.
So at this...
And sorry, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just a comment, because this is, I think, a very important slide for the community to see that 53% of their tax rate increase is due to our levy, and the other 47% is due to education and the county levy. So the number that people will fixate on is the municipal taxes of 3.87, if that's where we land. But in reality, their property tax will increase 5.39 because of the impact of education and county on their taxes.
That's correct.
Thanks.
And I just to build on that, major investments in County Road 43 and the long-term care facility, Maple View Lodge in Athens, are huge, tens of millions of investment that the counties is having to carry now. So part of the reason we're seeing the counties as a driver of a tax rate increase is because of their very, very significant investments in those projects, as well as heightened costs to operate our paramedic service. Anyway, onwards.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. So on this next slide, I'll just go, not dwelling deep into the departmental budget, but this is the departmental budget for the Office of the CAO, and I'll just wait for questions, and we have the department directors here as well to answer questions that council might have.
So just a quick question on the waterfront strategy. I think it's something that we deferred by virtue of, in fact, not having a consultant who was well-positioned to do the work, and I guess I'm hopeful that that landscape will change this coming year, because I know it's something the community has wanted for some time. And so I looked to be contradicted if I've misunderstood that. And under development and comms advertising at 105K, then could anyone lend any insight into that particular line, or could we get some more specificity on that one? Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, you're speaking to the Tourism 102K on the bottom of the slide?
Economic development and comms advertisements at 105K, the last words of the asterisk lines.
Oh, okay, thank
Yeah.
you. So it's my understanding that that includes largely tourism marketing
I see.
under the ECDEV budget.
Okay, thank you. If there's further information that you can provide, you can share it with council tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. The next is finance.
Any questions, colleagues? See any? Okay, you can move on.
Next budget is for corporate services.
And obviously, quite a bit under corporate services when you look at the asterisk line at the bottom. So lots going on in that line, eh? And the downtown parking study that I think is underway, can you just give us a quick update on where we are?
Through Your Worship, once the budget is adopted, we will release the RFP.
Great, okay. And have our IT service contracts changed at all in the last year or so?
So our contract is up in, I believe, April. We have brought on a full-time IT coordinator, so we do hope to see that line decrease once that position is in full swing.
Okay, that's good. It's good to hear that. Thanks.
The next budget is for the building division.
Ms. Martin, is there any comment you want to make on that one?
Not at this time, Your Worship. I just want to note that building division is entirely funded through their building permit fees, so they are a self-sustaining division.
So no tax-generated dollars?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Next budget is council's budget.
I think we're a bargain compared to these other lines.
There's your headline.
Okay. We're a bargain. All right.
The next budget is for the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department.
Just under contracted professional services, the service contracts at 180K, could Mr. Guy speak to what those are specifically?
Thank you, Your Worship. I can. So that's our sort of our rooftop HVAC units for the North Grenville Library, security alarm system, or snow clearing contracts. For trails, we have maintenance and signage contracts. Parks, we have porta potty rentals, tree removal services. Also within that is our recreation software program that we have, booking system, as well as the YMCA camp service contract and the potential for the pool program in 2023.
Thank you. And vehicle and building lease, do we lease buildings? Can you remind me?
I can answer that one.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
It's a lease for the Historical Society.
Right, in terms of relocating them to their Prescott Street
That's correct.
location. Okay, thank you. And there's some vehicle costs in there as well, is that right?
Yes, that's through our enterprise vehicle lease program.
Okay, thank you. All right, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, just speaking of leases globally, I mean, in our upcoming quarterly financial reports, will we be evaluating how we're doing? Because I know it's rather recent that we've adopted a lease program rather than actually purchasing the vehicles. And that was on the basis of saving costs.
That is correct.
Yeah, so-
We've encountered some difficulties on that end in terms of being able to source vehicles. Previously, because of supply chain issues, we're just starting to see the replacement of the fleet ramp up. So the reason why we've kind of delayed assessing or reviewing the program to find out if we're actually saving is because we're waiting for a complete overhaul of the fleet first to be able to realize those savings.
And if I might, just one other question for Mr. Guy. I know hydro and natural gas costs, right, at 153 are not insignificant, but given what we operate, what you operate on our behalf, of course, those costs are essential. Have you seen spikes in hydro and natural gas over the last year or so?
There certainly has been spikes in natural gas with, cost of living increases. We have seen, on a positive note, with our new lighting in this facility, our hydro costs, utility costs have dropped to about 25 to 30% since we've changed over all the new lighting. So that has been a positive side on that utility side.
And 25 to 30% is what exactly?
Well, we're in the neighborhood of $300,000 in hydro costs for this facility on an annual basis. So take 25, 30% off that. It's a significant savings.
Right. Okay, thank you. All right, let's carry on then.
The next department is the policing contract.
And as Deputy Mayor, who continues to chair the Police Services Board, will say that the value of that contract has been fairly stable over the last number of years, which
That's
is great
correct.
to see. Yeah.
In fact, has it not decreased over time?
Very slightly.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little bit. All right, thanks.
The next department is the Emergency and Protective Services.
And maybe I could just ask Chief Oakham, when we see repairs and maintenance, I presume that these are largely on the fire trucks, but perhaps
Emergency vehicles.
Is that correct, Chief Oakham?
Yes,
Repairs and maintenance?
correct.
Okay. And our fleet is relatively new, is that the case? Is it more maintenance and repairs at this stage?
We're at a good standing here in North Grenville. We put together a 20-year capital plan a couple of years ago, and we're trying to maintain that plan. If we continue with our capital replacement program, North Grenville will be in a good situation in the next couple of years. If we continue to delay, we may fall back, but as providing that we stay on top of our maintenance as well, that extends the life of our apparatus.
Okay, thank you.
The next department is the Public Works Department.
Director Dunlop, any comments on this right now, from an operating perspective?
I believe the highlight of this specific is the waste management contracts. We have a very successful green bin, blue bin, and waste collection program, and that is the majority of the contracted professional services under this operating budget.
Would you mind reminding me where we are with the Stormwater Master Plan?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. The Stormwater Master Plan has been contracted out to a consultant. We have done, at this point in time, a review of the data. We're beginning our gap analysis, and as spring comes towards us, we will also be doing some field work in regards to data collection to get towards a Stormwater Master Plan, which adequately reflects the conditions and the recommendations for improvement for our stormwater and also our catchments, both urban and high-level rural.
And when we look at repair and maintenance under contracted property services, what are the overwhelming drivers of that?
Surprisingly enough, a lot of it is drainage. We do a lot of repair and maintenance on drainage works. Culverts have gone up in price, so it is that is one of the main items: street drainage, ditch cleaning, culverts, as well as things such as pavement markings and street sweepings are under that line item.
But certainly the drainage piece looms large at this stage. Okay, thanks.
The next budget is for the North Grenville Municipal Center.
maybe
If
Mr.
you wish.
Ogamande quickly, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
Sorry,
Grant.
Madam Mayor. If you wish, I can just highlight some of the contracted property services, as I did similar with our parks budget. So we have Simco, which is our ice refrigeration service provider. Cantwell Air does our HVAC rooftop units. We have Gal Power Systems that looks after our building generator for this facility, Chubb Security. We also have a contract for water treatment services for all of our boilers and their cooling tower. So that takes up most of the contract property services line that you see.
And when we speak of the building lease, just to refresh all of our collective memories, this is the 528K is specific to this building in particular?
That is correct. Both the principal and the interest payments related to the financing of this building.
So that 528K represents what we pay annually to be
Yep.
in this building, to
That is
pay off
correct.
this building effectively?
That is correct.
Okay. And the completion of the repayment of this building is 10 years away?
2035.
2035. Okay, so ways to go. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, just regarding the financing of this building, I note that in 2026, the debt servicing reduces very much. Are we retiring one of those three debt facilities or whatever you call it?
Yes, I believe it's the down payment facility for this building that will be retiring in 2026.
And I note that one of those bonds or whatever, I don't know the term, we're just paying interest only. We're not paying down the principal.
That's correct.
So there'll be a $1 million lump sum payment to retire that at some point?
That is correct. So the Series C bond payment is just interest alone until May 1st, 2035, where we will be required to pay $1,055,000 principal payment lump sum.
Final question, I think I know the answer. Is there any way of converting any of those facilities, those bonds, to pay them off earlier or under more favorable terms?
Honestly, I have not looked into that, but I can certainly do that.
Given the volatility of interest rates, it would be fascinating to know if this is the time, but I suppose maybe worth a look regardless. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, we can carry on.
The next budget is for the Planning and Bylaw Division.
Ms. Martin, anything you want to comment on here?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think what's important to note is that a good part of our professional services is in relation to the 5-year review and update of the official plan. So we've put in some extra funds to ensure that we have a fulsome consultation process around the reinvigoration of our development policies.
Okay, thank you.
And that is a conclusion of the municipal operating budget for 2023 draft staff recommended.
Thank you. I think we may be ready to shift to capital, colleagues, council colleagues. Are we good to keep going? Okay, let's carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, so to begin with the capital program for 2023, we are bringing forward a $7.5 million capital program for the municipality for 2023. By division, Public Works is 5.6 million, Parks and Recreation at 715K, Emergency and Protective Services at 603,000, the North Grenville Municipal Center at 556,000, and other capital projects at 10,000. Going through the projects by categories, we have roads and bridges for 3.4 million, existing infrastructure rehabilitation at 1.6 million, equipment at 822,000, buildings at 451,000, other projects at 425, fleet replacement at 442,000, streetlights and sidewalks at 225,000. To fund this capital program in 2023, we're bringing forward the recommendation of a draw from tax revenue at 3.8 million, grants at 1.8 million, reserves at 1.1 million, other revenue at 400,000, and development charges at 274,000. And on the next slide, we'll go into the department-specific project.
And I'll just stop you for 1 second, because I think Deputy Mayor has a question.
Yeah, it's just, if you could go back one slide, and again, I hate to ask questions that may not have an answer, but with Bill 23 coming down the road, I mean, are we looking at some potential reduction on the development charges that we'll collect in 2023, or are these already on the books and pretty secure, the 274,000?
Yes, we've built up a reserve for the DCs. I believe that number is about 7 million, thereabouts. So this will be coming directly from that. But I believe from our estimates in the future collection of our DCs is where we see potential loss or reduction in the amount we're able to collect in the future. But these projects are already from already collected DC reserves.
So in the future, any reduction in the amount of DCs that we can collect on development would mean we'd be accumulating less dollars on an annual basis into our reserve, our dedicated reserve.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
So for the department-specific capital project, we have Public Works.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. This is the primary portions of the Public Works capital. Of course, we all know about the County Road 43 expansion, and the estimate for the short-term project cost is $1.826 million. There's $1.5 million in road projects, which are completions of ongoing gravel rebuild programs. There's repavement and rehabilitation, as well as a couple partnership projects with our neighbors to the south. We have a multi-use trail on concession. Elvira Street West, there is the design for anticipated future construction and the ongoing evaluation of ASE and options for actually installation in 2024. There's various other projects included. There's the snow dump facility, which the $60,000 is for land assessment in order to relocate our existing snow collection facility, and then various regulatory and infrastructure rehabilitations valued at $960,000. The one of highlight within that would be the Birds Rapid conceptual design. The conceptual design was completed in the past. This is the topographical, the engineering detailed drawings for a future capital application. Any questions on this slide?
Just for context, we know that our share of County Road 43 is beyond the 1.8, that I think you're calling it non-water and sewer road projects. So specific to County Road 43, are these costs specific to the first element of the project, which we expect to be the bridge, or is it for the road expansion itself?
Good question, Your Worship. We have roughly 1.8 million anticipated for the next 3 years for non-water and sewer type projects. The bridge, which is where we anticipate to start, we have a certain share within that, but this is our share of what they anticipate to complete within the first phase of the 3-year program. So we're going to start with the bridge. The bridge is not $1.8 million of our component, but hopefully they will get beyond that.
So we're setting aside 1.8 this year and into other consecutive years, is that the plan?
Yes.
Okay. And just the MUP on Concession Street, as you know, I think you've are well aware that given other high needs in the community when it comes to sidewalks, that an aspect of this multi-use pathway we've redirected to other places in previous years. Where precisely is the proposed MUP in this case?
The MUP that is included in this proposed budget is on concession from Prescott to the rail trail at a value of $75,000.
Right. I think we've also contemplated a a connection point between, I guess, in front of the campus all the way to the rail trail. So that is not what's proposed here?
That is not, that is actually in the anticipated 2024 budget, but there's always the option to swap them out.
Okay. And Elvira Street West, forgive me, is that a sidewalk?
The Elvira Street West is the design for the rehabilitation of Elvira's between Rideau and basically Bayfield for the design of new storm, curb, sidewalk, to bring it up to date due to the anticipated higher demand of the multi-unit residential that's anticipated at the end of the street. And it is also a DC-funded project.
Okay. So when Bayfield acquired land, built a new building, right, or we were able to collect development charges on that project that would help to offset some of these improvements of Elvira Street?
The new building that you're discussing is the one on George Street?
Yes.
So the George Street building contributed to a sidewalk program for George Street itself. This Elvira Street improvement was actually anticipated under the development charges backgrounder a few years ago, but we just see that with the anticipated development that's going to be occurring in the next couple of years, we need to get it going. So we need to get the design going and get the higher capacity for both vehicular and pedestrian designed and constructed prior to the opening of the multi-residential building. It's an apartment building that's being constructed at the end of the street.
I see. Okay. So it's in anticipation of a multi-residential building. So separate from the long-term care facility. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
These are separate conversations?
Yes.
Okay. And often we're asked about Clothier Street West, I believe, in terms of the status of that road, right? The fact that the sidewalks only, right, sort of stop in the middle of that road. And I understand that that for many years you've wanted to rehabilitate the underground infrastructure in order to improve that road as well. Where are we at with that particular road?
We have a design, or we have a conceptual design that was completed when the western portions between Barnes and Pine Hill was constructed. So we had to stop at Barnes because we ran out of money. So the idea is we need to rebuild Clothier Street to the same capacity that Clothier Street is west of Barnes. So we need to replace the underground infrastructure, the addition of a storm sewer, and get some curbs, gutter, and sidewalk, and potentially improve the illumination. We have applied for higher level government funding a few times, but unfortunately have been unsuccessful.
But we have been successful with some other capital funding, is my understanding, for underground infrastructure on concession. Is that correct?
That is correct. Mike was successful in getting a grant for the replacement of the water main, full length of concession.
Okay. So some of that aging infrastructure in Old Town Kemptville, right? Rideau Sanders, right? Saunders, Clothier. Is there a vision for how we finance some of that work? I ask because wearing my warden hat and my County Road 43 hat, inevitably there is some anxiety in the community about, the heavier use potentially of Old Town Kemptville roads as people perhaps avoid even some of the minimal or more extensive construction on County Road 43, even though we don't expect a road to ever be closed on 43. So to that end, I think there's a lot of anxiety in the community. Can you foresee upgrades, for example, to Clothier or to Rideau Saunders before 43 begins? Not, forget the bridge.
The short answer is no. But yes, we can foresee the upgrades of Rideau and Sanders. We have completed a detailed design for the replacement of the underground infrastructure, of which the storm sewer belongs to the county. The water and sewer is North Grenville. And it was actually designed in anticipation of higher active transportation, parking, and a one-way couplet. So the intent is to change the cross-section, but to improve its function.
And to that end, where do you foresee that, or what are the conditions that would enable you to proceed with that particular project?
I believe the project is estimated to be about a $7 million cost. So unfortunately, we do not have the sufficient funds. Water and sewer do have an asset management component under their rate study that they put aside for such things as water and sanitary line replacements. But the road surface, as well as the storm sewer, are a county cost. The water and sewer would be our cost, as well as the sidewalks and any illumination along those. So it's a shared component. It's designed to a 90% level, and we'd be ready to go, but we'd need higher levels government funding in order to make it a reality.
And you say we as in the counties and the municipality?
That is correct.
Because
We
the
have a
total value of that project is 7 million?
Yes, and
For
we have a-
Rideau, Sanders, both?
Yes.
And what is the county proportion of that?
Yeah, well,
Is it 7 million?
I don't recall.
Not 50/50.
No, if, I believe I'd have to go back and look, but I think it was a 60-40 or 66, 33% split, roughly around there. 1/3, 2/3.
So we'd be responsible for 1/3?
We were looking at the 2/3, and they'd be the 1/3 because of just being the road and storm, where we have the heavier infrastructure and sidewalks and things like that.
so we bear the cost for 2/3. Is that what I heard you say?
That was the last kind of proportional split we
Yeah.
had looked at.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, colleagues, on capital? Okay.
Next slide. Still on public works.
Sorry. The next is the equipment, and it's the replacement of an existing grader to a new format, a piece of equipment where we'd be looking at replacing a grader with a grade-all, which would provide for in-house ditch work as well as improved roadside mowing, both trees and brush. The other highlights on that would be the Colonnade Pond Crossing, which would be the pedestrian connectivity between the Starbucks, Kevlar property, and the Colonnade Canadian Tire properties.
And are you referring to the Colonnade Pond crossing? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. I also see in here the Stonehaven assumption at 400,000. Can you help to explain?
Certainly. As council is aware, the municipality has taken over the rehabilitation and completion of the Stonehaven subdivision works, the stormwater conveyance system, and in order to get the final lift of asphalt on Phase 3 and other works, we're estimating it at about $400,000, which would be a cost recovery product.
In that, and where's the cost recovery?
That would be, the matter would be coming back to council in a closed session report.
Okay, thank you. And I know that in previous years, the matter of sidewalks and how much we spend on sidewalks is always a bit of an issue. I can see, of course, you've featured a proposed multi-use pathway, which is great. Where would you expect these sidewalk rehabilitations to take place, or is this just to repair existing sidewalks? Is that what we mean here?
Yes, that is exactly what I mean, what this means, Madam Mayor. The sidewalk rehabilitation project includes a third-party inspection, a deficiency report, and then the roads department action that deficiency for panel replacement, sometimes longer sections of panel to keep our sidewalk infrastructure up to par.
Okay. And acquiring land for a road allowance on Prescott Street at Hilltop Concession?
That specific item is, the municipality has a sidewalk that runs from Hilltop Concession on Prescott Street. The majority of that sidewalk is currently constructed on private land, so we're looking at a land acquisition of the final 3 properties.
Okay. Councillor Strachan?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Director Dunlop, is the, could you clarify where the pedestrian crossover will be located?
That is actually, the location has not been determined. We will work, typically we work with the Active Transportation Committee to look into the best location. You might recall that we did do the rail trail last year, both on Van Buren and County Road 44. The options that are high on the list from Public Works standpoint would be the Settlers Grant trail that crosses County Road 44, or the upgrade in the downtown core, the Aza Street courtesy crossing conversion.
Thank you.
And the estimated costs of those PXOs?
The estimated cost of the PXOs based on the county road crossings are $50,000.
So you're suggesting this year that we would only do one, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Sorry, just to clarify, that's the cost of crossing a county road versus a municipal road is slightly cheaper? Is that true?
That is true, through you, Your Worship. The type of PXO is based on the class of the road. So if we're doing a smaller road, we can have a lower type of PXO. The higher type PXO has to have the flashings, they have to have larger arms, they have to have more signs and warnings. So they do cost more, as well as the illumination requirements.
So as I recall, the PXO on concession came in around 18,000. Is that correct?
The final cost of the concession was probably about the 30,000 range,
Okay.
but we did a lot of the work in-house.
So if that line item was 60,000, we might get 2 municipal PXOs, even though we haven't identified.
Is that correct?
If they were on the lower class road, that is a possibility. We do use solar now, which cut down the cost, but it does depend on the class of the PXO required.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on from Public Works then.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you.
Okay.
The next department, capital program, is the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department.
Thank you, Femi. So to start off with Parks and Rec capital, we'll go to the North Grenville Municipal Center. So we have some refrigeration system upgrades that we have to do here to our ice making system of $210,000.
And Mr. Guy, not to interrupt you, but since you're on it, what are those upgrades? Like, help me understand. I have no idea how ice is made, so I'd just be curious to know.
So they're the replacement refurbishment of certain components. So we have heat exchangers that are part of the condensing unit and a chiller, which helps sort of create ice. We have a brine pump install, a variable frequency drive modernization. So that the variable frequency drive supports the speed of our compressors. So it's an energy saving component. Our de-superheater provides heat for the water used in our Zambonis. Again, that's an energy saving component. So those things have to be either replaced or refurbished in order for our ice plant to efficiently work better. The result of doing this work will the need to close our rink down for the month of June. So there will be about a $39,000 reduction in revenues. That is has been noted in the budget. We'll also have some savings on our hydro and utility bills because we won't be operating our ice equipment for that time. So we'll have about a 2-week need to do the repairs and then 2 weeks to put the ice back in Arena 2. Public washroom countertops and sinks, it's just over the last, almost 20 years of the building being open, they're due for replacement, so that's worth $70,000. We have the security system modernization, which is the component to update our intrusion alarms or our card readers to get into our exterior and interior doors, the installation of cameras in our parking lots and staff entrance doors that we don't currently have, and also the clock system is due for replacement due to the motors in the current systems are now obsolete. As you notice, sometimes our clocks don't work in the theater. So some people might ask, why do you have a clock system? Well, I don't know how many clocks we have in here, a lot, but to go around and change batteries isn't really an efficient way to do it. So when the building was constructed, they put in a clock sort of monitoring system, and that's, as I said, it's 20 years old, needs to be replaced. Other infrastructure, we have the former Oxford Mills Town Hall of $250,000. So that budget represents consulting and architectural engineering services that came from the building assessment that was done in 2022. We're also looking at interior demolition of the entire interior for a structural review, abatement services, and also roof repair. I will add that the consultant who did the assessment for us in 2022, have been working with them and looking at a green and inclusive community grant through Infrastructure Canada. We've gone back and forth with a person from Infrastructure Canada. At one time, we didn't think we were eligible, but we received an email yesterday that maybe we would be eligible for a retrofit program of up to $3 million. That is due at the end of February of this month. So I'm hoping that we can get an application in. What that means to doing any work on the building this year, from what I understand through reading through the application guide, you can submit receipts back to April 1st, 2021. So if we were to do work on the facility or hire the services of a engineer, and we didn't receive notice that we were successful in the grant, let's say to the end of 2023, I still believe we would be eligible to submit those receipts for funding. So, and as far as when the deadline to complete the retrofit, if we were to receive money through that grant, would be March 31st, 2026. We also have the Maplewood Hall project. It's a carryover from 2022. We've added a couple $100,000 to it to include stone repointing as well as replace the windows. We received funding to complete phase 2 of the multi-use pathway on County Road 44. We want to get started on that project this year with a design. We received funding for the multi-use pathway in Riverside Park, and we are going to work in a partnership with Public Works to complete that project in 2023. We have the Birch Rapids Community Association Park, Council Chambers upgrade, North Grenville Municipal Center Hall, it's Hall B. We're looking to replace the screen and projector. Rotary Park interlock repairs, it's basically the wall that runs along the side of the emergency access. That is, we had a structural review done of that in 2022, and we do have to do some repairs to that. And there's been a need for some parking at Equinell Park. Again, we put $15,000 in the budget, and we're going to work with Public Works to complete that project.
Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Strahan.
Yeah, it's great news as far as that infrastructure, the green infrastructure program, that any work we do this year might be able to claim retroactively the cost. Last year we set up a heritage fund. So I imagine you might want to access that. I don't know the process. According to the budget, we'll be adding another $75,000, so there'd be $150,000 in that budget item, and I don't know, you might have to talk to Director Ogarande about how to draw down that money if it's required.
Through your worship, so we can actually go back on that one and introduce it in the next presentation of the budget to show a draw from that reserve. It will come as part of a presentation because it still requires council's approval to draw from that reserve, but we can certainly introduce it in the next round of the budget discussions.
Okay. Councillor Strahan?
Through you to Madam Mayor, thank you very much, Mr. Guy, for the update. I guess that my question is more so for you, Mr. Ogarande. When we look at potential grants coming through that we don't yet have confirmation on. So right now we're building a budget, we include these as expenses, it gets built into the budget and therefore into the tax rate. If then we have the money come back to us, it gives us extra cash in there, but the tax rate is already increased. Do we have any way to mitigate that at this stage? Are we willing to take a risk to say, yes, we're fairly certain we would accept it or not? I guess, you know, once you increase a tax rate, it's increased. You know, the reality is we don't go backwards. So I'm just wondering if, how that is thought through from your perspective, from the financial management side of things.
Through your worship, usually there are two approaches when we introduce in capital projects that are sort of contingent on a grant. It's either we put it in the budget and we highlight that it's contingent on the grant, meaning that if the grant is not successful, we don't go ahead with the project, or we could include the project and include what we estimate the grant amount to be. And if we do not get the grant at the time, we could still go ahead with the project and fund from either the tax base or the reserves. And when the grant funds come in, it just goes back to replace the draw from reserve.
I just wanted to, Your Worship, I just wanted to add, I think it was Mr. Orgarande mentioned it in an earlier slide, but it's not part of the slide here, is that we do have $25,000 in the budget for the to start the design and the property preparation for a park in the Temple subdivision.
Thank you. Long awaited, but we're happy to see it coming. Okay, any other questions? All right, then let's carry on.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. The next department will be first the Emergency and Protective Services department.
Thank you very much. The first project for $60,000 is the Fire Station Number 2 preliminary design. This is a project to look at site assessment, building design, and propose project costs for Station 2 development in Oxford Mills. The second item, it's referred to as a brush truck replacement. That's an old name that we use. We just recently changed the name to an emergency support unit. The reason for that is we have changed the use of the vehicle to make it a multifunctional vehicle. This vehicle is 32 years old, so it has served us very, very well. The replacement vehicle, we're looking at making it a multi-use vehicle. This will transport firefighters to and from incidents. It'll pull both our trailers, both the brush trailer and the water ice rescue trailer. It will carry all sorts of equipment, including our ice water rescue equipment, our extrication, heavy extrication equipment, and also our brush firefighting equipment. This vehicle will not have a water tank and a pump, which will save us a considerable amount of dollars. And this will also provide an advantage to us to use this vehicle in other uses, specifically in the cold winter without the water on board. We can run this truck on medical calls as well. The next item is also under fleet is the emergency duty vehicle for a cost of $72,000. We have 3 small fleet duty vehicles. The one that we're replacing is just over 7 years old, and it has 300,000 kilometers, so it as well has served us quite well. It was due last year for replacement. We were able to push it off to this year and keep maintenance up on it. We will replace this. It is a Tahoe vehicle, but we will replace it with a pickup truck. Purpose of the pickup truck will be more functional for our division. It will also carry firefighters and also be able to tow the 2 trailers that I mentioned earlier. And this vehicle will be able to transport equipment to and from a fire scene, which we don't have that advantage right now. The next item is under equipment for $161,000. This is self-contained breathing apparatus. So if you can picture a scuba diver wearing their air tank to go scuba diving, it's a very similar type of apparatus, but only used in firefighting, meeting firefighting standards. Our breathing apparatus is 20 plus years old. We are required to keep them certified to a NFPA standard. We do so, however, repair parts are now not available due to its age. These units are 3 to 4 standard cycle old, so what that means is it no longer meets the current standards with the safety requirements or safety technology that's out today. So we would like to replace this equipment for firefighters to wear. The next item is fire service equipment of $17,000. So that's various equipment that we use in the service. It's either replacing damaged, broken equipment or aging equipment, or we're simply implementing new equipment to perform our duties. It includes items such as firefighting hose that gets destroyed and we have to replace. We have 2 ice rescue suits, that have developed leaks, so puts our firefighters at risk, and we need to replace those. Medical supplies, etc. The next item under equipment, it says Hamlet signs. That is not an EPS project, so I can't speak to that. The last item is personal protective equipment. This is the firefighter bunker gear that they wear. It has a 10-year certification life period, and here in North Grenville we have taken our gear and we have strategically placed it at different year intervals so that we don't have to replace all gear in 1 year. So in this year we're replacing 4 sets of gear, and that's the items under EPS.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, questions in regards to this one? The brush truck replacement. So where is the brush truck replacement used? What's the scenario for the brush truck replacement?
Where is it used now, currently, or the replacement truck?
The replacement.
The replacement, so it's, like I mentioned, it's going to be a multi-purpose truck. So it will be used for all of our rescue type calls, ice, water rescue, heavy extrication rescue. It will respond to brush fires. We'll also pull the brush trailer. It's the only vehicle that we have that can pull the trailer. It will also transport firefighters, so it'll have enough seating to transport firefighters. And as I mentioned, because it won't have water on board, that we will most likely use this vehicle for medical responses rather than sending out an $800,000 truck. So it's a more economical, functional truck.
Okay. I was trying to envision the scenario. So it's not really intended to respond to building fires. It's really meant for natural emergencies that are either in a forested area or where it's obviously harder to get, obviously, a big, large, clunky fire truck. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's primary for the uses that I just described, but certainly can be used for structural fires because it will transport firefighters and equipment as well, but it won't be its primary use.
Right, gotcha.
Correct.
Okay. And the existing one is 20 years old? Did I hear that correctly?
32 years old.
Oh, 32.
Yes.
I see. Okay. Good to hear. Good to know it lasted 32 years. That's impressive.
It is impressive, and it's one comment about the fire service, different than, our public works plow trucks. They're out on a regular basis, and, they're pushing snow, quite heavy use, so of course they wouldn't last as long as 20 years. But firefighting apparatus obviously isn't running every day, although we run 6.5 calls a week, so it's almost every day. They don't have the kilometers that a typical plow truck might have, so we're able to maintain them longer than a typical commercial truck.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? I think that's our last slide before we tackle water and wastewater. Seeing no other questions, I will invite Mr. Finley to take us through water, wastewater. Is that correct?
Your
Oh,
Worship.
I'm so
Thank you,
sorry.
Worship. It's back to
Back
me.
to you first. I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Ogarande.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to point out lastly on the capital projects that the
Yes.
Hamlet signs is actually for the Economic Development
Right.
Department. Okay, and that concludes our draft capital program for 2023. So moving on into the water and wastewater budget. I'd like to just highlight for council and the community that this budget is, or this division is a self-sustaining division, and it's separate from the tax base. So no taxpayer monies are used to fund either the operations or capital program for the water and wastewater division. It's funded solely on user fees and user rates. And based on average residential consumption for 2022, we saw a slight increase in consumption rates year over year when comparing to 2021. And for an average household, based on the rate study, we don't expect to see any rate increases for 2023. So whatever the final rate that a user will be paying will be based solely on consumption. At this point of the presentation, I'll turn it over to the Deputy Director for Water and Wastewater to run us through the departmental highlights as well as the goals and objectives for 2023.
Thank you, Femi. So a couple highlights from 2022. The water main was looped between Maley Street and Bowen Crescent. What we do with water main looping is we connect dead ends so that we can improve water quality, any stagnant water that can come about through a dead end. So we have a list of identified areas within the municipality that have dead ends, and year by year we look to either set up a flushing station to move that water or loop the station, the area where possible. Again, you'll see that in our 2023 capital as well. Another item, a lot of the pipe works that we do is kind of behind closed doors. The public doesn't see a lot of it through our pump stations, but we replaced a lot of the discharge piping at our Van Buren station. A lot of this piping had been original in the mid 60s. Some of it was replaced in the early 90s. We were able to replace that whole discharge piece of that station. So that's going to help with reducing any downtime with pipe breaks or items like that. And as mentioned through Public Works as well, the water and wastewater crew did help set up the drinking water systems both at the RV park and Tented City, so that used up some time with us as well. So some upcoming projects for 2023. The Concession Road water main is an item we're looking to replace. It's an older main. We've had many breaks. We believe we have water break clamps beside water main clamps. Due to the number that we've had there, it was identified high on our asset management program as a main to be replaced. There's a lot of critical locations in that feed through Concession Road, such as the hospital, the Kempville campus, and the South Branch Elementary School and North Grenville District High School. So with that, we also received some provincial and federal funding, just over $650,000 to contribute toward that project. The design is being completed as we speak. It was awarded last year as a multi-year project with the anticipation of going to construction this summer. The hope is we can get construction rolling during the summer months while the schools are not in session, just to help with some of the traffic congestion that may cause on that street. Another big project that we have coming up this year as well is a water pollution control plan expansion. We are finalizing our design comments at this point. We have pre-qualified our general contractor as well as the mechanical and electrical contractors, and are hoping to, within the next month or so, go out to tender for that project. So we will hopefully this spring bring that to fruition and open up additional development capacity within the serviced area. So those are our two big objectives for this year. Would you like me to just continue?
Any
through?
questions, colleagues, on this one? Not seeing any? Okay, carry on.
I'll take it over. Okay. Thank you. So just going into the numbers for the draft operations for Water and Wastewater Division, it's going to be relatively flat year over year, with a slight decrease of tune of $45,000. Salaries and benefits will be to the tune of $1.4 million. Materials and supplies about $343K. Contracted property services at $893,000. Contracted professional services at $253,000. Other costs at $62,000. Fiscal expenses at $184,000. Debt servicing and transfers at $1.3 million. And all of this will be funded 100% by the user fees collected based on consumption of water and wastewater services within the municipality. The next slide is showing the distribution of the expenses by category. The biggest piece is the salaries and benefits at 32.6%, materials and supplies at 7.6%, contracted property services at 19.7%, contracted professional services at 5.6%, other costs at 1.4%, fiscal expenses 4.1%, and debt servicing and transfers at 29.1%, all 100% funded by the user fees. The next slide is highlighting all of the debts that are attributable directly to the Water and Wastewater Division. We have 4 different facilities currently ongoing. None of them will be maturing in 2023.
And I'll just stop you there. Deputy Mayor has a question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. This is before your time, but can you speak to the number 1 debt, East Quad? When we borrowed money to build that infrastructure?
Through your worship, I'll have to direct that to Deputy Director.
Someone who's got some historical memory. Yeah, Mike, can you just walk us through that? How, first of all, normally a developer will front end that kind of infrastructure. How do we end up with that debt? And it doesn't mature until 2035. Do you know when we incurred that debt?
So through your worship, this was part of, again, I guess I'll say East Quad. So this is from the Kempville Creek moving west toward the Colonnade subdivision. This was done roughly around 2007, that time frame. And what it was is to bring that portion of the serviced area on services. So water had already been run out to the old Canadian Tire, which is currently the Giant Tiger, a number of years before that, but there wasn't the sanitary services. So once the Colonnade development was put in, part of it was to run those sanitary sewers along County Road 43 and down County Road 19, as well as bring the force main back from the pump station to the treatment plant to allow for sanitary services in that quadrant. Part of the reason, I believe, and I wasn't part of the initial part of it, was for the economic development of the business corridor in that area. That was the reason why the municipality decided at that time to take on some infrastructure debt to boost that commercial area in that location.
So if we had the opportunity to develop another section of the municipality by installing sewage, water, and stormwater, we might look at paying for that cost in order to benefit from the economic development of commercializing another part of the, for example, down 19. Is that something that we might look at?
It's definitely a possibility. Typically, we do, especially for residential development, that development pays for that growth. At the time of this infrastructure, I believe it was to kind of get that jump start into that development growth. It is a possibility for along County Road 19 as well. When we are looking at our master plan, which is a proposal for our operating budget for 2023, the sanitary main along County Road 19 is going to anticipate to be a site-specific area to see how we can get that developed, either partnering with developers in the area, or seeing how we can take on that infrastructure. The tricky part is with some of the bigger capital items that we're looking at the moment, such as the water pollution control plan expansion. Some of our reserves and infrastructure costs are going to be tight, just due to some of the larger expansions going on at the moment.
Okay, thanks. That was a fulsome answer. Appreciate it. So we'll carry on then.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next slide is for the capital program for the Water and Wastewater Division. As part of this draft 2023 budget, we're bringing forward the capital program to the tune of 18.2 million. By category, buildings will be 15.1 million, existing infrastructure rehabilitation 2.2 million, other projects at 495,000, equipment at 223,000, and fleet at 105,000. Funding sources, reserve and other revenue to the tune of 17 million, grant at 716,000, and development charges at 425,000. So at this point, I'll turn it back to the Deputy Director to run us through the capital program for the Water and Wastewater Division.
All right.
Thank you. Through your worship, we do have a number of projects anticipated for 2023. Through our fleet program, we are looking at a compact utility tractor. This piece of equipment is a multi-use item. We are looking for to move some equipment around at our facilities, but also help us with snow blowing and snow clearing around infrastructure such as hydrants and items like that. Typically in the past, we've contracted out a lot of our hydrant clearing. However, as most contractors that are doing that work, when we need hydrants cleared, they're in their busy season with heavy snow removal and their other contracts. So we're having to offset that with the number of hydrants now that we have, that this can help keep everything clear and safe for the hydrant use. So that's for 100,000. So that's for the utility tractor plus what we anticipate for implements such as snow blowers, et cetera, to accompany that tractor. The track snow blower is a replacement of our existing track snow blower. We use this piece of equipment at multiple stations as well as at our wastewater treatment plant, just getting between the tanks, clearing the snow. It was an original purchase with the plant, so roughly around 30 years old, so it finally met its useful life. From equipment side, what you'll see in here is a number of pumps through our wet well mixing pumps at a cost of 90,000. We're looking at to keep solids in suspension in some of our wastewater pump station wet wells. This is to help things from settling out and having to be pumped out through maintenance. So the idea is to reduce maintenance at the stations. Replacement pump parts at our Aquanel and Bridge Street stations. As impellers and items wear through, we're just looking to replace some of those pump parts. We are looking at these ones specifically to be a stock item, as through talking to our suppliers, some of these have about a 20-week delivery time. So in an emergency, ordering pump parts is getting more difficult. We've noticed since the pandemic and infrastructure shortages. So we're trying to build up some of those emergency items so that we can replace when needed without having to wait. SCADA pack replacement. SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. These are the computer systems, part of the computer systems, I should say. At our pump stations, this one's for 60,000 is set to be replaced at our Van Buren station. So it collects the data of what pumps are moving, how much flow is moving through the station, etc. The old system can no longer be replacement parts for it. We can't source that any longer. So this will be the third replacement we've gone through in as many years. Kernahan was 2 years ago. We replaced that one. Last year was the Alfred. It was ordered due to supply issues. It isn't coming till 2023, but that SCADA pack was ordered in 2022. The chlorine pumps for just over 17,800. That is in replacement of the existing chlorine pumps that we have. They're on a rotating basis as required. The East Quad wet well pump, this is the well pump at the East Quad station. This is also a stock maintenance item, again, just due to supply issues, making sure we have well pumps available in case we happen to lose that well. The portable generator replacement is an asset management item for $9,000. Our current one, similar to the track snow blower, has reached the end of its useful life, and we're looking for replacement there. So the total equipment group is $223,830 on that. When we get into our existing infrastructure, what we mentioned before is our concession road project. So again, it's currently estimated at $1.5 million, with just over $650,000 of that being through federal and provincial funding. Again, we hope to replace that main and also increase the size to improve service delivery along Concession Road. I&I improvements, this is relining and monitoring the sanitary mains in an effort to reduce inflow and infiltration. So that's through either cracks in existing older mains that we can reline to keep rainwater out, or finding other ways of old cap services that weren't properly capped or have deteriorated over time. We look to replace those or leaking in maintenance holes and items like that. The cap artesian flow for $150,000. This is in an effort to reduce artesian flow that is currently happening at the Kernahan station. So we have excess water that we aren't pumping that is actually being wasted at the moment. So we're raising and redoing some pipe works in that station to cap that flow. It was designed in 2022 with the anticipation of construction of the pipe works in 2023. We have some County Road 43 expansion water main piping for $125,000, and that is to increase as part of our water main looping of providing sufficient service. There's an increase from an 8-inch main to a 12-inch water main. The sanitary main replacement for $100,000. There's a piece of sanitary main on Victoria Street that's a little extensive beyond our normal repairs that we do under operating for a sanitary service or just a manhole repair. This one requires a significant chunk of sanitary replacement as well as a maintenance hole. So that's why we've placed this one under a capital replacement.
Can I jump in here?
Yes.
Madam Mayor? Yeah. Okay. One of my obsessions besides drainage is infrastructure, water and wastewater infrastructure downtown area. So we know on Victoria Street we had a development come up, and there was some concerns about lot grading in terms of stormwater. So if we're going to dig up Victoria Street to replace the sanitary main, if it's identified in our stormwater master plan as needing a storm sewer connection, is that possible to do it at the same time?
Because it would be possible, but it may be difficult. Just for the stormwater portion of that will need its own specific design. They won't tie into the sanitary main. That's part of the
Right.
I&I we try and eliminate. This is only one section of the road. It's not the entire Victoria Street. It's only one piece of the street. So it doesn't actually front on the development that you're speaking of. It's actually one section east or west, sorry, of that. It could be looked at, but we're only doing one specific line to replace a few sections of pipe and a maintenance hole.
So a related question. I know the next three items are downtown. I'll pass on those, but the next item is with the Rubin Street development. There was some question about infrastructure as well, being sufficient to handle that development. How do we go about evaluating that?
So there's a couple different items that get looked at when we evaluate the capacities of that infrastructure. From a water perspective, we have a water model that we have a consultant run for us, and they can take, what they do is take the scenario, we tested our system, and they modeled it to see, okay, how does our water system work? And then we take a development, and the consultant incorporates that into the demands of that development into the system, and identifies any shortfalls. So that will be a process undertaken when we get to that point. And if there are shortfalls, then those have to be rectified before it can move forward on the water side. So that's a quick piece on that side. The sanitary side is a little more difficult. It requires a bit more monitoring, in-field monitoring. Typically, is what we ask for is what the existing flows are in the mains, and then knowing what the calculated flows are from the development, we can make that determination if there's a available capacity. We've only just started some flow monitoring programs, so we don't have a lot of data on what our existing flows in the mains themselves. We know what the pump stations, because that's monitored through flow meters, but not the mains themselves. So that's a bit of a piece that we have to work with the developers to, especially in our infill areas, of what the existing mains are and what the existing flows are, to see if we can add additional flows to them.
So that's for a new development.
Correct.
Final question is, in terms of the existing infrastructure downtown, it's aging. We're replacing part of Victoria Street. How do we assess the infrastructure in the older part of town? Do we do spot monitoring? Because as you said, we know what comes out of the pumping stations or into the sewage plant, but how fast does it travel downtown?
So we actually do for the sanitary system on a 5-year rotational basis. We clean and camera every sanitary main within the service area. So section by section every year, we pick a quadrant. The sanitary mains get cleaned. We run a camera through, and that's where we assess. You can get an idea of where the flows are, but it's only a one day time. That's where the flow monitoring is better, because you do it over a period of months, and you check that inflow and infiltration. But that camera work tells us the condition of the mains, so we know which ones. They also provide identification of any cracks, or if they see leakage or they see sumps, or we see them as well. We can identify that and look at repairs and add that into our asset management program.
Sanitary flow, what about water flow?
So water typically is determined through water breaks that come through. A lot of it's age-based for us right now. We are aware of programs where you can send systems through the mains that'll almost do a radar and test the thickness of the pipes. We haven't entered into any of those programs yet, or looked at that yet. At this point, we've just done the repairs based on age base and knowledge of where the breaks have occurred.
Okay. And there's nothing in this year's budget to adopt one of those monitoring programs, as you said. We haven't done it yet as far as water. We do it as far as sanitary by quadrant, and I'd be curious to know when the last time we did the downtown quadrant for sanitary.
I'd have to look at that. I believe it was only a year or two ago, but I'd have to go back and look. I'm not sure when downtown was done. Also, just from the water side, we do leakage testing. So I say we wait for breaks, but what we do is we hire a consultant out, and they'll go out and listen to valves near hydrants or water main valves, and if they can hear the vibration, hear the rumbling, then it identifies that there's a leak somewhere, and we can start to track things down from there. So we don't always wait for it to bubble up to the ground. We try and get a bit proactive and catch the leaks as they're just starting.
Thank you. I'm sorry to take up all this time on something we could probably have an sideline conversation on. Yeah, so I'd be interested in having further conversation with you about that. Thanks.
Not a problem. Okay. So our next one is Van Buren Pipe Works replacement. So I discussed in our previous slide that we did the pump discharge. So that was from the pumps out of the building. This is a second phase where we'd be looking to replace the suction side of the pump, so that would be all the pipe works that come from the reservoirs to the pumps, as well as pipe works from the well to the reservoir. So that's set at $100,000 for that project. We have a few items for our Bridge Street station, pump station. That's a sanitary pump station. It's some HVAC and lightning protection, just some replacements there, as well as an ATS replacement. So that's an automatic transfer switch. It's the switch that determines when the station loses power to flip over to the generator. The current one can no longer be replaced. We can't get replacement parts for it, so we're looking to replace the whole unit. The next two are our Equinel booster station and our Equinel sanitary pump station. They're both shingle replacements. The buildings are just around 15 years old, and shingle replacements are required for them. In this next slide, under buildings, we identify the water pollution control plan expansion at just over $15 million. This is our anticipated costs moving into this year. In total, we are estimating the project to be potentially around the $40 million mark. Again, till tenders are received, can't confirm that yet, but that is a rough anticipation if we get started kind of as our schedule is looking at by summer. We have our sanitary side for County Road 43, so this includes replacing a chunk of sanitary main. It's an aging piece of infrastructure, so instead of having the expansion completed and within the next 5 years digging it back up, we're looking to replace it at the same time. There's some cost efficiencies in there as well, with the county already doing their work on the road, digging it up. So we partnered with that, as well as part of our master plan. We've identified to double our force mains, and one is from our Colonnade pump station, runs from County Road 19 to the wastewater treatment plant. So at the same time, we'll be putting that section of that force main in, again, just to avoid doing construction on 43 in the near future. The water main looping is similar to what we mentioned at Maley and Bowen. This piece that we're looking at for this loop is at Saunders and George Street. So there's a dead end there that we were hoping to loop, or anticipating to loop, again, to improve the water efficiencies in that area. And the analyzers and monitoring systems, these are some ultrasonics that require, at 20,000, that require replacement as well. So the total for those other projects is $495,797. And
Okay.
happy for any questions on those.
We're ending with a bang, that's for sure. $50 million, among other projects. No, thank you, Mr. Finlay. It's a very fulsome presentation. It's obvious they have a good handle on how to keep our water and wastewater systems running smoothly, and clearly there's a lot of asset management within your purview, and as well as obviously the pending expansion of the upcoming plant. And I understand that the tender potentially would go out later this spring. Is that, do I have that right?
Correct. That is the hope, is early March. I would say early March, we can get the tender out.
Okay, early March.
Correct.
Okay, with construction beginning this year, in this calendar year? Is that?
For sure. We would anticipate by summer, probably have the contract award, and then move forward from that. So
Right.
there'd be construction starting, yes, either late summer, beginning of fall.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions on this particular file? Okay. Of course, the intention of tonight's budget meeting was to receive all of the information generated by staff, to have a bit of a dialogue, to provide any additional direction should we feel like we need it at this time, or should we feel like we should offer it at this time. Certainly, there will be a series of public meetings where we will be engaging the community. And then I understand that by the end of February, I think we'll be ready to take another crack at this budget. Is that correct? I'm just looking at Director Dunlop in terms of the next date for a budget discussion at council, apart from the community engagement sessions.
I believe the next date is February the 28th on the schedule.
Right, that's right. Okay. And then I just had one question. I know, Ms. Janou, we've been speaking about physician recruitment, and there's been a real appetite to potentially ensure that our community is well-positioned to attract some physicians. We adopted a strategy earlier this year, and there were some proposed budget dollars attached to that. Can you just remind me what's in this budget for the purposes of attracting new physicians to the community to fill some of those primary care spots that we know are empty right now?
Through your worship, there's currently $25,000 allocated in 2023 for the incentive program.
Okay. And what did the strategy propose, the one that we adopted last summer?
So the strategy proposes providing a $100,000 incentive over 5 years to a single physician.
A single physician. We know that there remains an acute shortage of physicians in the community, and they have been, as I understand it from primary care health teams, it's been hard to fill those positions. I'm just wondering if you could potentially, just working with your colleagues, give some consideration about whether or not we need to potentially attract up to 2 physicians, just seeing what we've seen which is that there's been no real movement on filling those gaps, and we have thousands of residents in North Granville without any physician at this time. I'm aware at the counties, at the United Counties of Leeds and Granville, through some recent conversations with Minister Clark, that some other surrounding municipalities and counties are very aggressively looking to incentivize physicians to come their way. So perhaps you could work with Director Dunlop and acting CEO at this point to see if that would be sufficient, or if you want to bring a slightly adjusted recommendation our way. Okay. Any last thoughts, council colleagues? I know it's been a long stretch. We want to express our appreciation to every member of the senior management team, certainly for being here this evening and giving your department some real thought. We appreciate the effort to align with certainly some of council's priorities in the strategic plan, and there's obviously more conversation to be had. But if there are no other comments or questions from my 2 council colleagues here this evening, then I'll move to get us through the rest of the meeting and have us out of here well before 10. Thank you. Not well before, it's a misstatement. Safely before 10, safely before 10. So I'll look to Councillor Strakian and Deputy Mayor Barclay to move and second that council receive the presentation titled Budget 2023 Municipal Operating and Capital Budgets for information purposes, and that council would direct staff to carry out public engagement sessions as a requirement of the budget process. And we've identified some dates, and we do encourage members of council to potentially participate in one of those. And we're hoping, I think, to have a virtual session in addition to 2 in person, one of which would be in Oxford Mills and one of which would be here. So with that in mind, I'll look to call the question. All in favor? All right, thank you. Next, of course, is moving to confirm the proceeding of council at its regular meeting held on February 9th. And Deputy Mayor, can I have you move that? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Strakian. This is just confirmation bylaw, colleagues. All in favor? Good, thank you. And of course, the blessed adjournment bylaw. And who would like to move adjournment? Thank you, Councillor Strakian, seconded by Councillor Barclay. And that is that we adjourn at 9:50 p.m. I'm going to call that vote. It is non-debatable, and I'm so grateful.